I think the other one asking the question is dumber than Kamala, so that's like, she's a dummy. I watched her over the years. That is one dumb woman. Sorry. I'm sorry, women. She's a dummy.
Wait, she's a dumb what?
I watched her over the years. That is one dumb woman. Sorry.
Donald Trump has gone back to insulting women as the driving force behind his campaign. But should he really start talking about intelligence?
I have a great memory. I can talk about hundreds of things at one time and always get back to that point that you were trying to make. I can do things that people can't do, but you know what? We have the biggest, this is the most important period in the history of our country.
I remember everything. I can talk about hundreds of things and not get confused. I can do things people can't do. You know, his relationship with his rally goers is a case study in manipulating people's reality.
Had to give the American people their voice back by building something called Truth Central. We are a nation that just recently heard that Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat. We've endorsed JP, right? J.D. Mandel. Think of it, a new branch of the United States military, United States Armed Forces, called Air Force. We appreciate it very much, Tim Apple. And what we saw at Pleasure, what a name right now. But what we just saw, we just left Pleasure. By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, because of lots of things, like Nikki Haley.
And keeping them committed to the lie that he can do things no one else can do allows him to continue to pitch wildly bad policies, like extreme tariffs, when literally everyone keeps telling him it would cost consumers.
They're stealing from us because they're taking our jobs, they're taking our companies, they're taking our wealth. And that's fine, because they have to compete too. But now they're going to have to pay for it. And they'll have to pay, and they'll pay hundreds of billions of dollars in pretty stiff tariffs.
I mean, who are you supposed to believe? The history behind tariffs, maybe some economists and business leaders, or the guy that told you he's godlike?
So we'll take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to make our country so strong and so rich, it will never be so rich. You know, we used to be an all-tariff country in the 1890s, 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s, all tariffs. That was when our country was the richest it ever was. It was never rich like that.
All tariffs and incredibly rich in the 1890s, huh? I guess he forgot about the Great Panic of 1893, where banks and businesses failed by the thousands. Railroads went bankrupt, credit essentially froze, unemployment soared, and tens of thousands of ordinary people lost their homes and savings. And in the Northwest, the galloping optimism of the previous few years suddenly gave way to widespread despair. The economic catastrophe lasted several years, and its reach, severity, and duration would not be exceeded until the Great Depression of the 1930s. But let me stop interrupting Professor Trump in his economic history lesson.
It was so rich that they had to set up a commission, the Great Tariff Commission of like 1887. It had one function: what to do with all the money. We had so much money, we didn't know what to do with it. And then in the 1900s, they brilliantly went to the income tax, where everybody gets taxed, and foreign companies could come in and just steal our treasure and our jobs, steal our wealth.
The Great Tariff Commission of like 1887. I can only guess, but maybe he's talking about the United States Tariff Commission, which was established in 1882. And it wasn't created because we had so much money we didn't know what to do with it. And it didn't have one function that the former president never mentioned, by the way. Its purpose actually was to impose tariffs on imported goods, which Trump agrees with and wants to implement as a punitive measure today. But he refuses to acknowledge that his favorite guy, President McKinley, who's known for being associated with tariffs in the 1890s, hurt consumers and his party when those tariffs increased prices for goods at home. It's like his handlers gave him 15% of a story that he immediately turns into policy plans without paying any attention to the conclusions. But it doesn't matter. He already declared himself the most amazing person in the world that can do things no other person can do. So he just moved on to another staple of his campaign, using Hitler's playbook of hate and division.
But she's surrounded by very smart, very vicious people that have to be, that are very radical left lunatics, okay? but they are smart. In some cases, genius. Look what they could do with elections. Look what they do. They're smart, and we have to be very careful. I talk about the enemy from within. They're the enemy from within. We have the enemy on the outside and the enemy from within, and the enemy, let's say you talk China, Russia, North Korea, you talk about different places. If you have a smart president, that's not going to be a problem. But the enemy from within is a very sick group of people, I can tell you.
He's gone through talking about certain people poisoning the blood of the country, calls others animals, advocates for a brutal and bloody policy of mass deportation, and now decides to increase his paranoia campaign by introducing the enemy within to his crowds of trigger-happy supporters. You know, there's extensive research on the Nazis' increasingly fearful pitch to Hitler's followers that Trump is executing as if he studied it.
We just rented Madison Square Garden. We're going to make a play. We're going to make a play for New York. Hasn't been done in a long time.
A play for New York with a rally at Madison Square Garden to highlight his campaign of getting rid of savage animals in the country, whose blood poisons the pure blood of real Americans that have to now look over their shoulder because the enemy within is ready to pounce, or else that's the end of America. Actually, he is right. It hasn't been done in a long, long time.
I pledge undivided allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Americans, American patriots, I'm sure I do not come before you tonight as a complete stranger. You all have heard of me through the Jewish-controlled press as a creature with horns, a cloven hoof, and a long tail. We, with American ideals, demand that our government shall be returned to the American people who founded it.